A very warm welcome to this episode of the Aligned Founder podcast titled, Am I a People Pleaser? Now, what we want to do in this episode is explore the pattern of people pleasing, or the nice guy, the nice girl, and give a bit of a breakdown of what it is, how it shows up, some signs and symptoms of what this pattern usually brings up in people, how they feel, the way they act, the way they behave, the way they think. And then if it's something that does actually end up resonating for you, what are some things you can do and some paths you can take to get out of that pattern? So really excited to be joined with my lovely co-founder, Rene, who's going to give some of his experience as well of this insidious pattern.
Yes.
Are you very excited to open the box on this one?
Yeah, probably my biggest behavioral challenge.
The end boss.
The end boss of my life that I wasn't aware of for a very long time.
So let's just kick off by defining, for you at least, what people pleasing is.
Yeah, that's a good start, because it's hard to know if people are even really aware of this term. We talk about it all the time. But people pleasing is, to me, it's also, as so many things, based on fear and shame. And it is the thought that if I'm always behaving perfect, if I keep harmony between all the people around me, then everybody will like me. And the fear is not being liked, not being loved. And because of that, I will sacrifice my own boundaries. I will have very hard time saying no. I will not be able to speak up for my own needs because I'm afraid of the reaction of other people and my environment. Mm-hmm. And that leads to just doing a lot of things you don't want to do, or not doing things you would like to do because you're afraid of the reaction of others, mm-hmm. which basically limits life in so many ways.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like almost like self-sacrifice. I'll put others' needs and what they want above me. And I think there's an example I can give later on this, but it's pretty much almost like feeling like just by existing, I don't deserve to have the same as other people. So I need to do things in order to be equal with others. Yeah. And their needs and what they think is more important to me. And if for any reason they don't like me, or they are angry with me, or people say bad things about me, then like pretty much at the root of it, it feels like I'm going to die. And so I will do anything in my power to avoid that feeling, even if it means completely overriding and self-sacrificing what I need.
Yeah. And the nuance for me was also, and I've heard this from other people quite often as well now, is not wanting others to think that I'm a bad person.
Yes.
This is also a big part of it.
Yeah. Which is like a very exhausting and time-consuming thing, because in order to consistently maintain what's effectively a mask or a persona, mm-hmm. it takes a lot of energy. It takes always being switched on, which creates anxiety, and just a feeling of just being run down all the time, because it's so exhausting just to exist. It's like, I want to rest, but then if I don't go to this party, then he won't like me, or people might talk about me. So I'll push myself to go to that party or that event. Mm-hmm. Even though I don't want to be there, and the whole time I'm there, I'm again maintaining this smile so everyone likes me, but the whole time I'm like, fuck these people, I don't want to be here. But it feels like being trapped in like a self-driving body that's forcing us to do things that we don't actually have control over. We're like living in this prison of our own body, being forced to do things that deep down we don't want to do. But what I found, what was interesting, because I would also class myself as a recovering people pleaser, is that at the core of it, I wasn't even really aware that I didn't want to be there. Like, I felt it, but it had gone so deep, and it was such a core part of how I experienced the world, that the thought or the feeling that I didn't want to be there wasn't even in my conscious awareness. I was just doing it, and that was just my experience of life, and it was just kind of sucked, but I didn't know any different or any better. There was just that's life, Yeah. It's like it was almost like the law of gravity, It's just, we accept it as it is. If I jump off a building, I will fall, If people don't like me, then it will be the worst thing ever. So therefore I must just do these things, and that's how life is.
Yeah. That it's with so many things, though, that's again the topic we just talked about this morning, the awareness of like the magnitude of how I was building my life around not making anybody angry, not upsetting anybody, was so big, had such a big impact on my life. Yet until a couple of years ago, I wasn't aware of it whatsoever. Like, I didn't at all know that I was doing this. Yeah. But once I realized, I thought, holy shit, every day I noticed, here, I did it again. and just such a big pile of things I ended up doing that I didn't want to do, which obviously made me grow lots of frustration inside. But it was not an option for me to say no to somebody. It was not an option for me. It was just like, I can't do this.
Not on the menu. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's quite stressful because we then have to get very creative about finding ways that we can create excuses, or even for some people, their body will actually create sickness and illness. So they have like an accepted legitimate excuse for not doing things.
Yeah.
Their body can't go on. So they have to, like, it forces them to rest or to not do things.
It's interesting because if you're people pleasing and you always try to make everybody happy, it's not all bad. I mean, I created a business around it, basically. I created so many friendships all over the world. There was not a lot of people who had bad things to say about me because I tried to make everybody happy all the time. However, on the surface, it looked like I was this good person. But really what they got was somebody who was manipulative. Somebody really, if they knew all the things I was doing, they couldn't trust. Because I still had to get my needs met. I still needed to get some of the things that were really important to me. I just got it in a sneaky way around because I was afraid to tell them straight into the face. So I did it somewhat in the back, through the back door. And sometimes it blew up and sometimes people found out, and that was some of the worst situations in my life. So I wasn't doing bad things to people because I wanted to, but because I was afraid to just speak up for myself and started to do like just really destructive things.
Tell me about some of them. Like, give us an example of that. Like, what's something where you were trying to have your needs met in a backwards way and it blew up?
What comes to mind? Okay, let's go to the girls topic. When I was dating in the past, I was single, and I obviously, because at the core I wasn't feeling good enough, so some of my validation was getting from women. Oh, this woman likes me, so that means I can't be that bad. However, on the other hand, I was very afraid of commitment, and sometimes there would be a girl who started to like me, and I knew already I don't want a relationship, but I just couldn't tell them. I couldn't be honest. I couldn't say, hey, this is all it is, I don't want a relationship. So I was dragging it out. I was saying nice things, but just nice enough, not really, like not bringing flowers or anything, but being nice enough that keep her kind of around. And eventually...
To make her not feel bad, kind of thing. To make so she didn't think you were bad.
Yeah, to make her not feel bad. And still, it was bad for her because she was still kind of around and maybe hoping. And I already knew nothing's going to happen. And for me, it was stressful because I had it always in the back of my head that there's this conversation. Oh, there's another message I need to answer. What's the next excuse? It was just like impossible for me to be straightforward. And again, this is like manipulating and... yeah. And
so why were you doing that? Like what was happening in your body when you'd see that message or she'd be there?
I just hated the thought of me speaking my truth and maybe upsetting somebody with what I'm saying, and that would make them feel bad and them think I'm an ass or I'm a bad person. And this was too much for me. Like even though I rationally knew eventually it's worse not talking about it, and it doesn't only have to be, it can be in business and in friendships and everything. Excuses, you know? Yeah. But the confrontation was too much, and I can't really say what it did in my body. I wasn't aware of that at the moment, in this moment, but...
Typically it's a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, because it's as I said, trying to maintain a character the whole time, trying to play this thing of like consistently trying to change and morph how we're reacting, like to play an actor. Imagine like being on stage the whole time and being watched and needing to perform as something that's not actually true and natural to ourselves. It's quite stressful. So yeah, I'd love to dive into like I think that's a pretty good intro into like how that, like some examples of that. But what are some of the signs or the typical characteristics of the people pleaser? So for me, the first one is, and you already mentioned it, the difficulty to say no or to reject people. Yeah. Because they might see us, they might be hurt. Yeah. And that can either come from a place of, I don't want them to think I'm bad or not like me. It could also come from, oh, I could never do that to somebody.
Yeah.
And usually that's just us projecting our own fears onto them. So for instance, with that girl, you could say, oh, I wouldn't, like, what's really happening, I believe, under the surface is I would never want someone to reject me like that. So I could never do that to her. Where actually in her world, she might just want you to be like, no, and then she can just move on.
Yeah.
But it's our inner belief of like, I can never hurt someone's feelings that's actually going to end up hurting her feelings more, ironically.
It's actually quite the opposite in the last few years when I really practice real honesty. Even if it's something that I perceive maybe this other person doesn't like to hear, the reaction is overwhelmingly positive.
Yeah.
If you're really honest with somebody and communicate it learn how to properly communicate, you know, then it's actually, wow, that's refreshing, this honesty. Thank you for that. And it's so much better, and I feel so much more free as well.
Mm-hmm. I think a part of another symptom of not being able to say no is therefore overcommitting. So saying yes to a lot of things and then having a lot of things on the plate, a lot of people expecting things, and then just being completely overwhelmed by that.
And growing resentments towards self. Why did I say yes again? I don't have the energy, I don't have the time, and just keep saying yes. Yeah. So, on the one hand, pleasing the others, but really growing resentments towards myself.
For sure. And a second part of that then is attracting, because of the inability to say no and state these boundaries, which is what you said, which for me, a boundary, like it's a hot topic, but it's pretty much, imagine the walls where like a bubble around self, where my world ends and yours begins, or where the rest of the world begins. And, you know, people like, respect my boundaries, you know, and they can just think they can just shout at people. But it's more about like understanding what I need, what I want to welcome into my space or into my world, and then being able to maintain those boundaries. Kind of like if a country has a lot of resources, but it just has no like borders, then people can just walk across the border and take what they want and fuck off. And that's it really, you know what I mean? They have no control. Where it's having those walls and having those rules of saying, please don't cross this line, that allows people to enter with respect. Yeah. You know, and in a business or relationship context, it's actually giving people the feedback that they need so they can show up better for us. Because I believe a lot of people, most people actually want to meet us in a healthy way. They want to be like, hey, you know, you're like, I want to have a positive and fulfilling relationship together. Like, let's build and grow, whether it's a business together or a friendship or a romantic relationship. And the challenge with the people pleasing, though, I found is if we don't know, because we've suppressed it without realizing, but if we don't even know where our borders are, where the lines are in the sand for us, then people will just cross them all the time. And what's even worse is if we've grown up in an environment where our parents used to cross those boundaries and that was just normal, then that becomes a normal feeling. It's like, it doesn't feel like a proper connection until someone's walking all over me. That's love, you know, or that's relating. So this is how insidious this can be, that like, even though maybe it doesn't feel good, on a certain level, it feels familiar. You know, so that's why typically, this is the kicker, we tend to, as people pleasers, attract the other end of the spectrum, which is, again, pop culture. Instagram will tell you it's the self indulgent kind of type, the more narcissistic type, which isn't just like, you can't just call everyone a narcissist, but like people who are more advantageous, more likely to want to take things for themselves from a place of profiteering or gain. Again, not always conscious. It's not like there's these bad people kicking around everywhere, but they've just learned, in the same way that we learned people pleasing is the way to have my needs met. They learned that being advantageous and maybe taking advantage of situations is how to have their needs met. So there's a diagram I like to draw to kind of explain this. And if you're watching on the video, hopefully you can see this. So this would be an example of a spectrum, okay? So we've got a basic line running from left to right. And on the left side, we've got people pleasing. And then on the right side here, we've got what you could say confident or arrogant. So most people, you know, on the left side, people pleasing, the right side, confident, arrogant, most people would probably say, I'm somewhere in the middle, you know? I'm not too people pleasing, but I'm also not too confident and arrogant, you know? I'm not like a narcissist, but I also, you know, I'm not a full people pleaser. Like, I do look after myself sometimes. And I think maybe you would have used that example before, Rene, of like, hey, I'm not living in my village and doing the job that everyone tells me, therefore I couldn't be a people pleaser because I'm already going against it. However, what most people who are typical pleasers don't realize is there's a whole other right side of the spectrum that stretches all the way out to the right. And that is where we have our arrogant, kind of self-indulgent, more narcissistic type, okay? So actually the person who's a people pleaser, if we look at this graph, and again, this is harder if you're sitting at home, but somewhere what they thought was the center of the graph actually lies much closer to people pleasing than true confidence, because they've forgotten there's this whole other side of the spectrum, which is the arrogant, advantageous narcissistic spectrum, which is really where, even though there's a lot of, dark side to that, there's a lot of positive things, which is the ability to say no, the ability to take what we want, and to believe that our needs are important. And that's something I think a lot of people pleasers, even if they understand that, they don't actually embody that or feel that they feel like by definition their offering to the world is less than, and they need to do things and accept bullshit from people in order to get by and be enough.
Yeah.
What's been your experience with attracting in advantageous people into your life?
Yeah, so there was one guy actually that I met who was very friendly in the start. Later I realized extremely manipulative, very intelligent. And this was probably the only time I can think of that somebody sensed my people pleasing and really tried to take advantage of it. Mm-hmm. And really knew that I can't say no, or that I struggle with it, and really tried to infiltrate himself into my life, and in some ways also destroy some things for me. And luckily I was already a little bit along on the path, so I started to realize what was happening, but I was still afraid to act on it. And I remember we talked about it. So it was very hard for me to get out of this, I don't know, it wasn't a relationship, but this, I don't know, this friendship that it started as. Yeah. And I just realized this person, in the essence, at the core had the same problem I had, not feeling good enough and being ashamed, but a completely opposite coping mechanism. And that's, I'm the best, I am perfect, I don't have any mistakes, so that also he doesn't have to look at his shit. Yeah. It was just completely the opposite side of how to deal with it. And yeah, it was quite a challenging time for me and also a very liberating time to get out of this. And but I learned a lot from it. Sure. Because it made me really confront this matter. Yeah, for sure. I had a few situations, like obviously as a traveling musician for many years, there'd be different musicians that would come into my field. There was one that would very occasionally turn up that would request to play concerts. And every time we would go to play, he would like not turn up, or he'd turn up super drunk, or just like was just a mess basically. And it was so hard because I wouldn't be able to say anything when he actually eventually arrived. He'd be apologizing, I'm so sorry. And I'd be like, I'd just smile and be like, oh, it's fine. But behind his back, I'd be bitching about him to everyone. I'd be angry. I'd be, and it was, oh, woe is me. I'm a victim. This guy did this. I can't believe it. Everyone's like, oh, I can't believe he did that. And then the next time he'd say, hey, let's play a concert together. And again, I couldn't say no. So I was like locked in. So I'd try to avoid him so he couldn't ask me. And then I remember I had this situation a few years later where the same person, like I'd, been looking into this thing a bit deeper and started just realizing I can say no to people. And then he reached out, and it was almost like a test from, I don't know, fucking God, the universe, and being like, hey, here's that thing you've been like doing, like time to repattern it. And this person reached out and said, hey, like want to do a concert? And I just was like, no, I don't. it just no. And it was the most liberating thing ever, because that no was just not available for such a long time. I don't really know why. Maybe it was a fear of like even though maybe he wouldn't have got angry, maybe there was a fear of anger. There was a fear. It's very hard to describe. It's just a deep-seated fear. And it's really challenging and toxic to be in those situations. And like on the flip side, incredibly liberating to realize that I could say no, and that was okay, and nothing bad happened. Yeah. It was like, oh my God. Now, in that, there's almost like a grieving for all the times that I wasn't able to say no. And I went along with bullshit, basically. But that's the way forward. And it's being able to, not just understand that I need to say no more, but actually learn the tools and learn the patterns in me and overcome these deeper fears, so that when I'm in that situation where, the spotlight's on, this person has asked again for something and I don't feel comfortable, that I feel then okay to place a boundary and say, actually, this isn't okay.
That really is the growth, you know, the actual implementation of those boundaries and that no.
Yeah. Yeah, because it feels like we're creating such a safe space by getting along with everybody, but it's just such a major cost for ourselves, this growing resentment, this burnout, like the amount of energy that I had to bring up to please all these people.
Yeah.
It's like an unbelievable amount. And yeah, I said it many times, like I didn't understand why I had so many health problems and stuff. I was eating healthy, I was working out, I didn't drink alcohol anymore almost, and still all the time I got sick. And I'm like, how? Like, why does this happen? And now, like reading this book, for example, Gabo Mate, The Myth of Normal, the connection between stress and immune system weakness and stuff like that, all makes sense to me. And in fact, like, this is the first time in a very long time I have a proper cold. In the last 12 months, I felt great, which was probably the health-wise the best year for me in a long time after I started with breathwork. But I could really see the connection between just the permanent stress I put upon myself with this behavior and how it was liberating afterwards. Yeah. And even started to be like after the first no, when it was like this moment like, oh, I can't say no. Wow, I didn't die. That was actually not that difficult to then every day realize, oh, here I could do it again. And then it almost went to a place where I was celebrating my no's. Like, you know what? No time, or I don't feel like it. And I was just like almost proud of myself and seeing this new way where I can protect my capacity. Yeah. And people still being okay with me, still having my friends, you know. Yeah. So
it's it's a crazy dance, because the goal of the people pleaser, like, this is nothing, it's this external self-worth, needing and wanting to be liked by everyone and being seen in a good way, you know, seeing as a good person. However, one of the biggest fears, I think, of a people pleaser is actually actualizing their full potential. Because if they go out there in the limelight and now they can't control anything. Now, a lot of people can see them online, and they can say whatever they want, and they can't control it anymore. So I think actually a big thing that for me, people pleasing, was actually suppressing. Like, I could be successful just enough in a small bubble in my community that people liked me and knew me, but I was a very humble success. I was behind the curtain still, no big deal, you know, I'm just humble guy over here. And the fear, actually, the biggest fear, I think, was fully actually getting out there and actualizing, because it would have exposed me to so many things that my system kind of probably deep down knew it didn't have the ability to handle. So I think that's something that beyond the, you know, not maybe going or not going to a party, which is like, you know, short-term people pleasing thing. I think one of the deeper things, if you're someone who this stuff is resonating with you, is like checking in with how much do you actually like own and seek to actualize your bigger goals in life. Like, if you don't know where you're going or what you want to do, is that because you just haven't sat down and thought about it, or because your system is saying, hey, let's not look at this, because if we go there, we might not be safe. Better to stay small where we can control things.
Do you know the actual core for you, where it started? Why you became a people pleaser?
Well, it's always the childhood, isn't it? You know, that's where the good stuff happens. I can't put my finger on it exactly, but I've noticed two like different patterns from my two parents. God bless them. As always, like with every parent, does their best, did an amazing job, and really supported me in so many ways. These are just patterns that get passed down from generation to generation. I think we're the first one that really gets to look at these and break these. Yeah. So for me, I think I noticed in the last years in interacting with my parents, I got to almost relive some of the old things that used to happen as a child, but I just accepted as reality. So one, for sure, was a feeling of always trying to impress my dad or trying to win his approval. But it never really felt like I could really get there, because what I noticed was I would try to do things or try to achieve things, and I would kind of come to him for, oh, look, see, like, I'm going to do this, like, I'm going to, you know, play football, and I'm a goalkeeper, you know, and then he would kind of say, well, you know, you need to do training and do coaching and get videos and study it and do it really properly. And I kind of just wanted to play football. But then I found myself trying to be better and better. And then if I let in a goal, he was watching, and it was an even higher level of stress, because he'd be standing there watching me, and it was like an extra level of pressure. And then from my, and then funny, even with with my music and my guitar as well, it was this constant battle of like, I wanted to just learn myself, and he wanted I should do lessons, and that really stuck for many years after. If you'd got your finger out and done it properly, you would have done lessons. And it was this thing of like me wanting to find and carve my own way, and feeling like I needed to prove to him something, like I'm not enough as I am, I need to do more. And again, that's just, naturally, that was his experience of his dad, probably even worse, so that's pretty normal that gets passed on. And then with my mom, I noticed where her tendency was to always, or not always, but like there was a tendency to consistently self-analyze and say, oh, maybe I'm the problem. And I think that's a big thing of the people pleaser. Like, what did I do wrong? Like it's like an internal shame of like something happens, an event happens, and I instantly assume it's my fault, which is kind of a good strategy because it makes us very self-aware and likely to do more inner work, instead of like, oh, nothing's my fault, So it's probably better, but if it becomes toxic, it's this thing called toxic shame, which is not like I did a bad thing. It's like I am bad. And it's therefore then trying to consistently prove to people that I'm not bad, and also mask the fact that I might be bad, maybe deep down, I don't know yet. So with that, I noticed it was a few situations that came up in later years where I would come to her for advice on something, and I found myself walking away from the conversation, not feeling empowered, but feeling like really down on myself and hard on myself that I could have done better. And then afterwards going and talking to someone else who was like more neutral, and they just validated and said, you did a great job and stuff. And I'm like, wow, I noticed how in my interactions and in her patterns, which again, it's just, we all have patterns. That was just her specific one, was this self-critiquing, and I found myself being very hard on myself. So that resulted in, like that's kind of how that showed up. I'd love to hear for you as well. What were the main signs?
It's funny that when you said that with your dad, with football now, this is one I never considered, but I actually had the same. I always had to call my dad after the games, and I was always worried about his reaction. So basically, only if I played very well, there was the approval. And by the way, also I have to say my parents gave me a lot of love. Like, I have nothing negative to say in general about my childhood. But as you said, these patterns that were given down, it was for him, it was just so important. He wanted to be proud of me because it would make him proud to tell people about his son that is so great at playing soccer, which is some topic that was important to him. And he just let me feel that. And as a child, this is obviously very challenging. There's a few things. The other thing was I always hung out with my best friend's house at the time, and they had a lot of money and we didn't. And I saw his dad was really respected, and he was also, even at the dinner table, the very respected person. When he was laughing, everybody was laughing, kind of thing. Yeah. And all his friends were like the politicians of town and like very important things. So for me, it was like, okay, I'm only good enough if I have money and power and the right friends. And we were like more simple family. And then, but really, I think the biggest one is around my mom. And we had a very beautiful conversation about all of this after I did the first breathwork session with her. And
that was you facilitating her?
I was facilitating her in a breathwork session, And it was very emotional, and it just resulted in a really long, deep, and good conversation between us. So she had already told me about her childhood, and there was, without going into too much detail, but her stepdad was not treating her and her brother very well, quite the opposite. Always told them they're nothing, they can do nothing, and they always got punished in different ways. So she was basically walking on eggshells her entire childhood, trying to be perfect, because if she's perfect, doesn't make any mistakes, she couldn't be punished as badly, which she was afraid of. And that was her whole childhood. So she created this pattern that I need to be perfect so that I don't get a bad reaction from the people around me. And this showed up in so many ways. One thing that I remember still as a child or as a young teenager was I would always visit my friends. It was never a problem. If I wanted to bring friends home, there was always some kind of pushback from her. And I noticed in the end, I could only bring friends if she had prepared the perfect dinner and everything was sparkling clean. Because she didn't want to risk any of the boys coming to my house, then telling the parents, oh, we didn't get the best food, or it wasn't maybe, even children don't even think about that. But she was so adamant about this that I couldn't bring friends home. sometimes, and just always telling me, oh, you shouldn't go out of the house like this if somebody sees you like this. And it was just always about what other people think and how they perceive me. So there was like all these different elements. Then as I became a teenager, all my friends were really tall, good-looking guys, and I was really a late bloomer. I was really, just the last one in the team. Let's say no girl would look at me, and I was like, okay, either I need new friends or I need to create skills and qualities so I can work my way up so I'm as good as the others.
Yes.
So there was actually many angles as to where this all came from. And I was just basically in all areas feeling like I'm not good enough.
Yeah.
And I have to compensate.
Yeah.
And then, I was a good soccer player. I got a lot of popularity from there. Then I started the company where we organized party holidays, and I was the guy organizing it. So a lot of people, hey, great, amazing. So I was masking all of these things with outside validation all the time. But I needed to keep that up. And that was a very hard work to be always liked by so many people. And if there were 100 people that loved the party I organized, and there was one who didn't like something, this would hit me in the heart like a knife. Like I could only focus on this one. So, and it has some positives. Like I was able to read the room very well, understand different people, different
Set a very high
cultures.
standard as well.
Yeah, connecting with people really well. The problem is though, it's never good enough, and it never stops. Okay, today was a success, but tomorrow I need to please everybody again.
Even more.
Even more.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think that's for many people, be that people pleasing or other things, is like these negative kind of behavioral patterns can bring us a long way and can serve us many times, but it's never going to be enough. And it's also, once it fails, it really hits hard. So that's where it's so important, I think, in adult life to be aware of these things and then start to switch on why am I doing things, and stop to do things out of fear and find ways to do it out of real conviction and for positive reasons.
Yeah.
So,
There's an example I like to use, which is imagining like this idea of running away from the tigers. So one day waking up in a car, realizing that you're driving 200 miles an hour in this car, the engine's about to blow up, and you can't realize, you don't know how you got there. And then looking in the rearview mirror and seeing these big, crazy fucking tigers running after you, chasing you, and you realize, oh, if I stop, these tigers will eat me. I need to keep going. Now, people standing on the side of the road might see you drive by at 200 miles an hour and go, wow, that person's so successful. They're going so fast. What they don't see is the tigers and the fears that are actually in the back driving you forward. And that can get you so far, but it can also burn your engine out.
was just like, yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And I said, but it stops here now with us. If I'm going to have children, we both are aware of these things, and we are then going to be able to navigate such things very differently. And I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And finally, want to add to what you just said around the personality and the behavior. It's also something I thought about a lot in the last year, because I used to be this person who thought, oh, this guy is jealous, or this guy is bad, or whatever. Like, I was just making a whole assumption and judgment about a person when I saw a certain behavior. Mm-hmm. While it's such a big difference between the personality and the behavior, because the behavior is learned and often based on fears, especially like the negative behavior, or if we see it as that. And really now, if somebody behaves in a way to me that I don't like, I don't think anymore, oh, what a bad person. I just think, okay, what happened in his life or her life up until today that makes them behave that way? And that allows me to be much less triggered, because I know it's not so much about me, but about them. And even also, if I make a mistake today, or if somebody criticizes me, I used to see it as an attack on my entire being. And now I'm just like, okay, there was something about me or about my action that was upsetting somebody else, and I'm ready to listen because I can learn from that, and it doesn't mean I'm bad inherently. So, and that's just so much more easy to go through life like that. And you're so much more comfortable person to be around if people can come to you with things and just say, hey, listen, can we talk about this? Rather than in the past, I would have been like, what? No, that's wrong. Like right away attacking back, or defense, you did this, or yeah, it's just such a game changer for relationships.
Yeah. I had someone tell me there yesterday that, hey, there's this person who doesn't like you for these reasons. And I'm like, great, good for her, you know? I actually laughed. Like, I was like, that's hilarious, you know? Because even if she really knew me, like, and we spent a lot of time together, and she came to the conclusion she doesn't like me, I'm like, great. That saves both of us the time. Yeah. But I don't believe that's the case. I believe that there's one or two interactions or things that have happened that then created, based on her life experience and her values, an opinion of me, which I can't control anyway, you know? So I'm like, you know, go live your life and maybe we'll run into each other again, but it's like funny to hear. What you just said before is a really nice transition into this, like the solution to people pleasing. Like, how do we actually overcome this pattern? Because separating the pattern from the person, because we were even saying I was a people pleaser, I am a people pleaser. That's like identifying with the pattern as like, this is who I am. However, if we can split those, and instead of saying I am a people pleaser, we say I have a pattern of people pleasing. Okay, there's much more power in that, because now it's more of a behavior. It's actually an unconscious choice that we're making. So it means that we can, like, instead of saying this is who I am, this is my identity, therefore it's fixed and I cannot change it. And actually, in order to maintain in integrity with this version of me that I say that I am, I now need to continue people pleasing. Okay, I can say, well, actually, I am a respectful human, or a self-respecting human who has a pattern of people pleasing. Now I can say, okay, well, actually, I notice this pattern. Does this serve me? And then I can choose new behaviors, and it's in the conscious choosing of new behaviors that I change the identity or that label, you know? So on that note, the first step to overcoming people pleasing is to realize that you are not a people pleaser. You just have a pattern of people pleasing. Okay, it might be something you've done your whole life, but it's still a behavior pattern. It's not at the core of who you are. And that is the power. I think that's like the fundamental source code that we need to change this, to believe that change is possible. So for me, the second step then is acceptance of that, and just like bringing awareness to this and just being like, okay, this is something I'm doing, and just owning it. And sometimes people want to deny that. Like you even said before, like when you were before, I'm not a people pleaser, I don't do that, you know? Becoming aware of it and owning it means that we have the power to then shift and change it.
Yeah.
It can be a challenging step, because again, maybe you're listening to this, you see parts of yourself in it, and then there's another part of you that comes alive. No, that's not me. I don't do every single thing that I said, therefore I'm not that, you know? It's like, this is not a one size fits all. It's a nuanced thing. Some people prefer to people please from a place of everyone must like me. Other ones do it from a place of I can't say no. It's slightly different, you know? Other people want to, they take on too much task. It can show up in different ways. Some people in their romantic relationship are very assertive, But then at business, people walk all over them. So it's very nuanced in how this shows up, and it's all typically down to your relationship with your two parents and your caregivers and your environment early on. Totally. Have you any tips? What have been some of your main things for overcoming this?
Well, it's been quite a journey, because for me this was a very deeply rooted pattern. But really, like in the past, been reading a lot of books, podcasts, psychedelics, which was probably helped a bit. But on this particular issue with people pleasing, it was really the 5 months in Bali with breathwork that really showed me the magnitude of my people pleasing, what it means to me, why it's there, and also letting it go. And basically just through more self-love, really accepting myself for who I am, accepting that I'm not perfect, and that's totally okay, that nobody is perfect, and therefore I can make mistakes, and also acknowledging how different people are, like being in Bali, being in this container with breathwork, just seeing so many different perspectives of how 10 people can perceive the same day, we sit all in the same room in such a different way, made me realize, like, we're so different. So all of my actions and stuff, not everybody can like it, and that's totally fine.
It's like the blind men touching the elephant. So if you heard that, three blind men come to an elephant and they feel it, and one feels the trunk. So they say, an elephant is this long thing. Another one grabs the tail, another one grabs the leg, So it's like, they're all right.
Yeah.
But, and they could argue about it all day, but ultimately it's the same thing they're talking about, just different perspective.
Yeah. So I really had these very profound realizations in my breathwork journeys that just showed me that my fears I don't need to have them. Definitely also many of the conversations that we had, we have been on a similar path for many years now, and just really analyzing ourselves, talking about it. And the third part for me personally, because I still like to be nice to people, even though now I can differentiate, hey, here I really need to set a boundary that goes outside of my capacity, but it doesn't mean that now I just say no to everybody. I still like to, within my capacity, help and support other people and be social and all of that. Yeah. But I can now really make a proper decision. Okay, I analyze, is that what I really want? Is that within my spectrum? And then I do it. And then if I have to say no, I learned to communicate very carefully and in a way that is very honest, and sometimes even speaking to that. I'm like, listen, this is actually quite uncomfortable for me to say because I really don't want to upset you. Yep. But if I would say yes to this invitation now, it would actually put me under stress because I have so many other things to do. And I really don't want you to think that this is a decision against you, because it's totally not. This is just me looking after myself. Yeah. And I think this is a huge one, because the one side is me wanting to be a people pleaser, but then also society has learned that if people say no to me, it means maybe something is wrong with me.
Yeah, so I'm a bad person then,
Yeah, so there's an element of people also taking the truth quite poorly.
Yes.
So me stating, hey, this is not at all against you. I'm just looking after myself. Even saying that, some people say then, wow, thanks for saying that. Like, okay. And then it's much easier, and then they appreciate the honesty, and then it becomes a much easier communication in general with this person. Yeah.
A tool I found really helpful for that is what I call the no sandwich. So that's basically where, of course, it's well and good to say, oh, no, we just need to learn to say no to everyone. But how do you actually do that, particularly if we spent 30, 40, 50 years always saying yes to things? It's almost like a knee-jerk reaction. Someone says, can you do that for me? Oh, yeah. And before there's even time to think, and then we're hating on ourselves. So there's the pause, okay? But then there's still being able to say positive things, but then you're putting two yeses and a no in the middle. So like 2 slices of bread is the yes, and then the meat in the middle, or whatever veggies, is the no. So it's like, wow, thank you so much for inviting me to your party. Unfortunately, I won't be able to attend it, but I really hope it's great, and I'd love to come maybe sometime in the future. Yeah. You know what I mean? So that's a way of still feeling like the majority of the feedback is positive.
Yeah.
And it's like you can dress it up all nice with all your, you know, dressings, but it's still a no. And then again, if they come back, oh, but I really want you to be there, you know, and maybe try to manipulate you a bit, says, wow, thanks so much for that. I really appreciate that. Still not going to be an option, but I hope it's great. And it's just like a repetition of the no sandwich, basically, if you've got people who are like pushing you. What I found how breathwork really helped me with this was it helped me to work on the deeper pieces of fear and, as you said, shame as well. Yeah. So this deeper fear of like, I am not good or I'm bad, just as I am. Therefore, I need to do things for others. So by me correcting that within myself and feeling like, oh, I'm actually okay, like I'm good, you know, then I don't feel like I need to then knee-jerk respond to do things for others to feel okay about myself. Yeah, you know. Even if they don't like me, I can laugh about it, you know, which is the ultimate freedom ultimately. Yeah. Because you can have all the money in the world, all the friends in the world, but if you're spending every day in a state of anxiety and stress, trying to manipulate your environment so that no one dislikes you, that is not freedom. Mm-hmm. And also one thing I had to learn was saying goodbye to some people. I mean, I think that's something many people realize as they grow older. That's the hard no. Yeah, that's just the circle of friends maybe becomes a little smaller. Yeah. I used to try to keep everybody around, but I also realized once I came to that point where I wanted to always be fully honest. But there are some people who just cannot deal with the honesty and will always take a no as a rejection towards themselves. Yeah. And I just don't want to be around people anymore where I just can't be fully honest. And I want my friends and my business partners and my girlfriend to know that if I say something, it's always with the best intention. Yeah. I mean well. I don't have any bad intent towards them. And if they really trust that that's the case, then a no is much easier because they will just... Now I can say to my friends, hey, I'm sorry. No, I don't even explain anymore. And they know, okay, he has reasons for that. Yeah. Cool. And it like that's so much more comfortable way to live. Yeah. To just have people in your life around that, then everything becomes a difficult discussion. Yeah. So I had a situation recently where there was a double. I was in Thailand and I had decided, like, you know, a couple of weeks ago that I want to take a good break from any partying or alcohol. It's not really something I'm interested in. So when I was in Thailand, I made the decision, first of all, to not go to the party that a few of the guys were going to, like on this trip. I said, actually, even though I have fear of like letting people down, I was like, hey, actually, that doesn't feel right for me. And I felt actually, even though it was maybe a little edgy, it ultimately felt better to go with what felt true and to have the availability. The second piece then, when I was in Thailand, I was going to play a couple of concerts or go out, and I had a moment come up, which would have been much bigger in the past, of like, oh, if I go there, I might know some people. I would know some people, and they would be expecting the old version of me to come and drink and party. And then I would have to let them down, and there might be mocking or they might be taking the piss. And I was actually like, do you know what? I'm really comfortable to stand with a smile and say, no, you know, I'll have a soda water, and let them, and they did. And they, oh, he wants a soda water. Oh, you know, I'm like, cool, you know, enjoy, you know, because it ultimately, and I think that's a big thing for people. It's they'll either completely avoid those situations, not go out or not go, or they'll go and they'll drink just to not upset anyone or to not feel bad. And actually, even though it's edgy, the greatest liberation is to be able to go and to just be in that space and to be with other people's discomfort of your rejection of their way and not trying to fit the mold, you know, and just sit in it and just enjoy it. It's really fun. Yeah. And I found that the work with the breath work has been huge in that, because again, it's letting go of these deeper fears and the shame that allows then in that moment when there's a knee-jerk reaction to be like, oh yeah, I should actually drink, to just be like, breathe, no, it's all good, you know? Yeah. And then just to relax into it. And for me, that's where the freedom is. Yeah. We have come a long way on the recovery from done all right, you know. People pleaser. We've got very similar patterns actually from the parents as well. That's very interesting. Similar patterns, similar lifestyle in the past and now. Here we are. Yeah. Good times. Good times. So what would you advise to someone if you had to leave with someone who's been listening to this? They're saying, oh, wow, maybe I do some of those things. I might be a bit of a people pleaser. What would you recommend as the next step? Well,
the great first step is what you did to me. You sent me the book, No More Mr. Nice Guy.
Aha, yeah.
Which
that's
is
a good one.
just a great book that brings a whole range of examples. And if you're somewhat of a people pleaser, you will see yourself in that and start to realize maybe the things you're doing in your everyday life. And I think that's the first step, to be aware with everything. You need to be aware first in order to even start going on the journey of working on it.
Totally. There's another great one that I actually remember one Sunday in Bali. I sat down and I read the whole thing front to back and had I was in a bit of a process for afterwards. It was quite grueling. It's called The Disease to Please by Harriet Breaker. You can get it. There's hard copies there or on Kindle as well. I don't think there's an audiobook, but that was the one that taught me about the no sandwich. But it talks about this thing, the 30 days of no, where you have to like deliberately like each day up the game to increase your capacity to say no. Those books are a great way to basically bring to light some of these patterns that maybe you don't even realize, but it will give examples. And if it feels like someone's just kicked you in the chest, that means that's a good sign. Yeah. It means, oh shit, I do that.
Or also the podcast that just came out, Chris Williamson with
Robert Glover, No More Mr. Nice Guy, yeah.
Yeah, No More Mr. Nice Guy author on a podcast if you prefer to watch a podcast rather than reading a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's also good. And
plenty of resources, but the best thing to do is just to get out there and start telling people no, basically.
Yeah. And obviously come and try out the session. Breathwork.
What I love about that is like, you know, being able to identify the areas in which we're doing it first and saying, oh yeah, shit, I'm doing that, but then immediately going deeper into it and feeling it and then letting it go. So when the same situation arises again, like that time with the musician for me, or with that guy who was taking advantage of you, to be able to turn around and say, actually, do you know what? I see this and I'm going to choose a different way. And it's in choosing a different behavior in that moment and having the capacity to respond and not react in that way that then creates a whole new trajectory. And once you've done it once, that's the black swan. You now can never go back. You know, you've shown to yourself that you don't have to say yes every time.
Yeah.
So there's hope.
For sure.
Just don't stop believing, you know. There we go. Nice one.
Yeah.
Excited for the next one, but for now, have a wonderful day. Go check out those books, No More Mr. Nice Guy and The Disease to Please. I'll put the links in the show notes below. If you're curious about trying a bit of breath work, coming and hearing more about what we do, you can go to reallyaligned.com, or you can message Rene at reallyaligned.com or Pete at reallyaligned.com. You'll also find, you know, a link through our bio on the Instagram channel at reallyaligned on Instagram. Have a wonderful day and stop that pleasing, yeah?
Next time.
Yo!
Ciao.